Welcome to the latest episode of Authenticated. I am here with Kayla Jury. She is a curriculum consultant and also a very, very dear friend. Take it away. Tell us a little bit about you.
As Kate said, I am a curriculum consultant and developer. I'm also a coach for coaches. And so, oh man, the story of how I got there feels so long, but also so short. I was an educator and curriculum developer in my past career and then transitioned from that into being a coach of my own business that I created with my own curriculum and my own frameworks. And now I'm moving on to kind of another journey where I am smushing all 15 years of those experiences together where I get to help other people do the same thing. And it's really fun.
Which I love. And that was one of the reasons that when I was preparing for this, the first thing I thought about was expansion. Because you are a pivot queen, but you take everything with you, which I think is so spectacular because it's like a really loving, embracing thing, which is what I think makes you the perfect coach of coaches, because that is acknowledging who you are as an entire person and bringing all of that to the forefront of whatever artistry it is that you are doing. And what you do is very much an art because it is incredibly malleable.
I love that you say that. I view it, yes, as an art, but I think I've always kind of seen myself, and I think you'll resonate with this because of the way your brain works. That's why we are dear friends so fast. But I've always viewed life as just a science experiment. And in science, when you do something, you're testing, managing controls, and always gathering data. And then you take that best data and you keep it and you use it and apply it the next time as you continue the experiment over and over. So when you say like, take a little bit of everything and then kind of keep it as you apply to your expansion, I think that that's a really powerful thing that a lot of people kind of forget is they're like, oh, well, that experience is like gone and done. But no, there's like data that you've collected from that experience that you get to keep and apply to everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait. Okay. So that actually kind of takes me somewhere else. If that is such a wonderfully embracing of self and past experiences, past lives, whatever you want to, encompass them as, what is your relationship like with like forgiveness and acceptance and like taking things with you?
Oh, loaded. Dive right in. So, well, I think there's a lot of different facets to that. And I think when you look at something, and as you know me, Kate, there's been a lot of stuff in my childhood, if we go like way back and in my past, that was really difficult. And I think when you think about forgiveness, there's, for me, two pieces. And I think in order to forgive, I also kind of have to, if we're using the terminology that we just did, collect that data and learn from it in order to be like, oh, there was a purpose, whether or not this was good for me or not good for me, but deemed like a good or bad, hard, difficult situation. Out of the most difficult situations in my life that might need me to give forgiveness or apply compassion both to myself and another person are also the ones I think that have made me who I am the most.
Yeah.
So they kind of go hand in hand, but I will say forgiveness easier said than done. Like there's been a lot of things where it's taken a long time for me to apply that learning, accept that learning, and allow compassion, I think, to myself first.
It's a much more massive concept than just, I think one podcast episode. I think it's a lifetime episode.
Yeah, and it's like one of those skills that you get to practice and
you
get better at
practice
and carry on with you over time.
But that term of information is really intriguing to me, where it's like, this is all information. This is a science experiment. Now I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to move forward with it. What are the sort of pillars that you look for when it is that you're receiving information in new circumstances or new adventures or whatever that you're like, you know what, that's a little piece of magic that like Kayla needs and I'm going to take on with me forward?
I love that. I was actually just writing in my newsletter about how this is a practice that I love and I've been doing it my entire life, but it doesn't mean it's always easy because one of the things that I stand for and that I'm a big believer in is that life is full of shoulds. It's full of rules. It's full of all of these things that we have to do, should do, be like. And it makes it harder then to take in information that is for you when you think, oh, this is just the way. And when you get that idea about a rule or a should, then it makes it more difficult to pull out and apply and say, how does this even feel? I think that's the first thing that I ask is like, does this even feel good? So here's a kind of like fun little example of the places where I've been working on the shoulds in my life. In the past year and a half, 2 years, I've been working on my self-image, like my fashion, my style, what I want to wear, how I want to dress, how that expresses who I am.
Yeah.
And when I first started that, and looking back now, of course, hindsight's 2020, looking back now, I purged so much stuff that I loved because I first started experimenting with what was trendy. Learned real quick I don't like most trends. So it's like, then I got rid of all the clothes that I liked. I had a bunch of clothes that were trends. Soon my closet just turned into black, white, and neutral. And I was just like, oh, okay, the shirt is like part of me coming back to like, oh wait, no, I love like the color and like the little cartoons on it and stuff like that. And so, but that was a place where when you feel that pressure, it's hard to ask yourself those questions to begin with. So what do I ask myself? I think the first thing is, how does this make me feel? And again, question easier asked than necessarily honestly answered. And I've had to practice honestly being able to answer that to myself, because there's been times where I'm like, oh, this should make me feel good. So then I tell myself it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
You know, versus like, wait, am I actually happy? Does this make me smile? Does this feel like an expression of me? And there are times where I try on a trend and for like 5 minutes I do feel good. But then I go out and start doing my stuff and I'm like, wait, this is not for me. Right?
Yes. And it's a longer conversation than just in the moment, because it's really tricky. It's very easy, I feel like, to just be like on autopilot and, well, this checked the box, so thank God I don't have to think about it anymore. But you kind of have to activate that part of you to like make it fun, where you're always constantly asking yourself questions like, I love how I feel in some things, standing up and staring in the mirror, not necessarily functioning when I'm leaving later. And people also underestimate what fashion does. Constantly.
Yes. And how it makes you feel.
Yes.
But I also think it's a good example as we're using it. And I do this so many other things in my life that feel maybe even, I know we underestimate, like you said, what fashion does, but feel even more impactful, like relationships with other people and stuff. But if you think about fashion as a great way to take some, like you might be like, oh, I love the cut of this dress, but the color's not working for me. So then the piece you take is the cut. The shape, and then you go on and you keep knowing that you like that shape and you get a different color. Where I feel like before I ever saw life as an experiment, or when I wasn't doing that, I would just scrap the whole thing and be like, oh, it's not for me. Versus take, oh, that shape is good, or oh, that color is good. But I think you can do the same thing in relationships, in your business, and whatever. And also in vice versa, like you said, being put on autopilot. I think one of the big things that I've been doing and viewing my life as a science experiment, and this comes to the expansion piece and the pivot piece, is there are some things that are good and good enough, but that's really different than soul on fire, energetic, living life, the biggest, fullest, boldest that it can be. And why do the just good enough? Like, why wear the outfit that's just fine when you can feel like this, you know? Why do that other thing during the day, that other job or career, if it's just good, when you could just actually want to go to work every single day, or the people you're around, when you could just like want to message them again.
That could not be more true. And that's always the option that people have. And I feel like that is the first wall that you have to get past when you really want to get into deep self-work. As a coach, as a consultant, as an artist, anything, you have to be excited by that. And you also have to accept the fact that there is good enough, there is okay. But why do you not qualify to have soul on fire the best? And there's something in our work together, developing Me 3, the way that your brain, because we have very similar brains, we've talked about this a lot, and like you and I are endlessly curious humans. But the way that we approach different information, and even when we started talking about this, I had this thing come to me. This mentor that I had in undergrad said, listen to everything that's said. Don't necessarily take it all now, but you might need it later. This thing where it's like you can approach someone and like find the things that you're like, well, hey, does that not feel great? But what if it does? You have this beautiful way of approaching people's brains, but putting it into a digestible format, but it still is their fire. But it then becomes the impetus to become other people's fires, because it's like you're finding the foundation of every single feeling and then translating it. And I think that the reason you are magnanimous and amazing at what you do is because you are combining not just the information being put forth, but in the root of the human, which is how we feel about it.
Absolutely. Well, and I think when I think about the best and being an educator first, that was one of the ways that I was very different when I was a teacher and working in that field. Is a lot of people, and I used to be so sour when people talked about their poor like educational experience and how they hated school. And then I had to remember that I was different, because I was like, if you were in my class, I'm like, yeah, but you're one class out of a million. Like, okay, so now you understand why other people don't have that experience. But I think that's one of the things is so often when people think about education or relaying an idea, they think about what I like. If we're talking science and art, they think about just the cold, hard facts and knowledge of it and telling you that. But none of that matters if it's not applicable to your life. If it's not something like you said, if you can't translate that fire, no one's going to do anything with it. No one's going to care about it. No one's going to apply it. And the whole point of having knowledge is to apply it and to make your life better in any possible way. And so that is really important to me. And I wouldn't create a project without that. But with you and Me3, it's so easy to do because your excitement and your passion is so like strong and bold and thick that it's like almost tangible. Like I feel like I can touch it. And so it does make it easier to translate. And all of your ideas, like your brain is genius. Everybody, this is genius. Just so you know.
I can't wait for it to come out. We
really
like made something so cool. My question though is when you're approaching someone else's IP, you approach my brain, you approach what I'm writing, and you talk about the texture it has and everything. But if I'm so hyper specific as Kate, so what is your approach to approach Kate's brain and then say, here are the fundamental pillars that are definitely going to translate to everyone else? What is that process like?
Well, I'll start one step behind that.
Okay.
Where the thing that's really important is and this is why the work that I'm doing is specifically very different than like coursework, because normally, again, it's just the knowledge and the facts and whatever books that we read and, knowledge and facts. But how we started, and I think the part that's so important in the process is your brain dump part, where you get to your job in the whole process is to stay the creative, the inspired, the visionary, and put all of your beautiful intellectual property, just spew it, vomit it all over the place. And even for us, it was really fun because you're like, I'm just voice memoing, just know that there's going to be all sorts of grammatical errors and stuff, right? But that freedom to get it all out. And then it's my job to then look at it. So I think that's the part that is very important to come first. Because I think when people go to create courses or create memberships or educate people, they don't even allow for their passion to first be in there. And when you brain dump like that, your passion is in it. That's why it's visible. And that's why I can then see it.
Yeah.
So then what I work with after that is I just start reading through. And the very first thing that we started the very first time, if you remember when we met, was I was just asking like your beliefs about what it means to be a creative and about what it means to be an artist and about what it means to do all the things that you do and your industry does. And I start to look at those deeper patterns that are almost like undercurrents, right? Like if you're looking at a river, you see the stuff on top, but often there's something underneath. And that's what I'm looking to find, where it's all connected in that bigger, deeper idea.
Yeah.
And usually that bigger, deeper idea isn't necessarily a knowledge or fact, right? Because that's how we then tickled it out into concepts and skills. Those are the hard things.
Yeah.
But your deeper meaning, your core ideas, as we've been calling them, are like the undercurrent to your passion and your large beliefs. And so they're there and you can see them appear in different ways within your dumps and conversations and words.
Yeah.
And so my brain, I feel like the Queen's Gambit sometimes when she's like seeing the invisible chess puzzle. And I'm like,
on the ceiling.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my, you know what? The next creative venture will somehow be a way for me to clone you a bajillion times because every child needed you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That expansive sort of thinking. And, and I always say if someone says something to you and it doesn't make any sense, find someone else to explain it to you. Like you're perfectly capable of understanding it. I wish that I had that as a kid and knowing that you were so passionate when someone said, oh, the curriculum sucked or the teachers sucked. You're like, I didn't. You're passionate about it, not because they're saying it. You're passionate because
it could be another way.
Because it could be another way and you're doing it. You're the one actively practicing it.
Just like a small tangent.
Yeah, please.
I've decided my future like passion project, and maybe it doesn't have to be future, but is going to be not getting back in the classroom and not creating another curriculum for the classroom, but creating an after school program that teaches, because the curriculum that I wrote, the first one was a science curriculum that taught life skills for kids in that way. And that way I still taught the knowledge that I was supposed to, required by the state and the government or whatever, but taught them how to live life and to think differently. And so I want to create an after school program that does that, but also educates the parents on how to continue that, because it's hard when it doesn't keep going and they don't get the same encouragement everywhere else. Like we can all have felt that in our lives where we might have been in an environment that we might have been stifled, and parents don't try to do that. But like thinking about thinking isn't something people just do for fun. Well, I mean,
We do, but that's like a bigger approach. And that's also like the environment approach and the world approach. And it's not just like, how do we do this right now? But it's how do you continue to do this yourself? How do you use the tools on your own for you to be able to facilitate this for yourself? That sort of self-thinking is really hard. What do you think it was that got you to get to that place of being like, my thoughts are the most valuable things that I'm going to have, and I'm going to think what I'm going to think, and I'm going to believe what I think?
Ooh, when did I first feel that way? I mean, I'm thinking about like some of your IP and some of the things, and I'm like, honestly, there were a lot of times when I was really, really young in my childhood, and I believed that, where looking at the home that I grew up in, I was like, I know what my dad's doing right now is not the way. And I know I don't. And I remember people used to ask me all the time, like, how did I get out of my childhood? And I was like, I didn't know there was something better or different or what it looked like. I just knew I didn't like where I was. And so I was just, and so I think maybe some of those, like, I, even as a young child, could be like, I would have handled that differently with my brother versus what my dad did, or things like that. But then I think that translated into really well in my teaching career, probably is where I most recognized it in myself, is because I got that feedback from kids immediately. There was like immediate feedback that like, oh, wait, no, what you are doing is so positive and so helpful and so meaningful that it made it easy to be like, hold on to it and keep making those decisions and keep thinking again about that deeper meaning.
I wish that was like something that everyone got as a kid, where it's like whatever that gut feeling is, like keep following it. But also, instead of, because, there's a fork in the road there where it's like, this doesn't seem right. And am I going to be resentful about it, or am I going to use it to be a better person myself?
Yes.
What's that saying? Like, every parent traumatizes their child, or something like that. Like whatever, but it's like when I have these conversations with my parents and I have this forward thinking, and I'm the kind of daughter who tends to overdump on my parents, where I'm like, well, I'm thinking this and that and that and that. And so I'll tell them everything. We had to have a conversation a couple of years ago where I was like, hey, I'm not judging you, just so you know. Like, I'm just kind of taking note. I'm just telling you that I would have just done this differently, but I'm not like, because it's not about that. It's about the learning. It's about receiving the information and implementing it into your own brain.
Well, and I think the thing that's hard about that, and that's where coaching and like your course, your like whole membership is going to do this so beautifully for people. And as you're like talking about these things, how it's amazing for kids, I'm like, yeah, and you're about to do all of this, like curate that thought work for adults, because we didn't get it as kids, and like all of that stuff, our parents just, it wasn't part of that. But I think the secret to it, right, and this, is getting to a place of neutral first, because that's why your parents feel like you're judging them, because they're like emotionally attached to the experience, and we all are. But it's a practice of being like, okay, if I could step back. I love with my coach asked me this question one time, it blew my mind. She was like, if you weren't making this about you, what would it mean? And I was like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Right. Yeah, it's such a good question.
Because what would be more powerful than making it about yourself and what you believe and what you've been through and what you know?
Yeah. Well, but I mean, it helps you step outside and be like, if this were happening to Kate and not me, I could objectively look at it and be like, it's not a big deal. Why am I freaking out? Or I could objectively be like, this is obviously the moral of the story. But when you are emotional, it's hard to see all of those pieces.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're about to have some insane brain blasts, because your coach,
Lindsay?
No. Sorry. Yes. She's fantastic too. No, but Coach is college.
Oh, yes.
Like
the program I'm building.
The amount of insight that you're going to receive by, like, because you're choosing a world in which you are deciding to be surrounded by very high functioning humans who want to do this. That's fucking beautiful.
I'm so excited to launch this program. And I guess going back to the very beginning, talking about a pivot, one of the reasons why I want to move into that very much is because these types of conversations just like knock my socks off. Like, I love this. And that's one of the reasons why I think we became such fast friends, because it's like, oh yeah, let's talk about small talk for approximately 98 seconds. And then let's talk about something deeper in the meaning of life. Right. And so it's that makes me feel I love using my noggin. I just do. And so putting myself and creating a program where I get to do that every day. Well, I'm definitely not going to be working every single day.
No.
but every single week and being part of it, I'm really, really excited about.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a beautiful reflection of your brain being all around you, which is going to be amazing, Yeah. So expansion in line with community, what does that look like to you, like on a work basis, like who you're working with, but also like the community that contributes to your expansion, and also how do you curate that?
I love this question so much because I think that I feel like it's like an over and underused question. Overused in that everybody talks about it, underused, and I feel like people don't, I don't want to say do it right because there's not a one right way, but don't use it to its full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when people think about community, they're just around people, and it's not the same thing. And I think in the same way that, you know, everything in life is a science experiment, your relationships, the people that you're around, asking myself, does this person make me feel good? Does this person bring me closer to my goals? Does this person allow me to like do the things that make my brain feel on fire?
Mm-hmm.
Or does this person like kind of make me like just sit here or yawn or like that whole good enough thing?
Yeah.
I used to have this thought, and this does come from my childhood because I moved, by the time I was in college, I lived in 20 different houses.
Wow.
So I moved a lot.
Yeah.
So having friendships was really hard, long-term friendships. And I used to be so envious of people who were friends with people for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want that so bad. Like I want that friendship that will just last, and that they come over to your house and they do whatever it is, you know, or they're like always there, and then they're all your bridesmaid, all these different things, right? And I just always, for the longest time, literally until like probably a year and a half ago, did I have this intense desire for that. And I would try to create it in my life. But what I realized is that stupid saying that is like a friend for a season and a reason and a time is so true.
It is.
It's so cliche, but it's so true. And I think I've felt the best about my friendships when I do make them intentional for my life in the moment, and I don't like pull one into another life moment, if that makes sense.
That makes me think of a thought I have typically, you know, pretty frequently. It's like, make it make sense.
Yeah.
But make it make sense now, not when I feel like the world is crumbling around me and then I have to have this come to Jesus moment. I sit down, I'm like, okay, Kate, make it make sense. It's like, no, make it make sense now. Is it making sense? Do I like it? Am I comfortable here? Am I thriving here? Am I growing here?
Yeah. If my goals are changing and my life is changing, and mine personally has rapidly changed, like think about me when I was an educator and I'm teaching small children and things like that. The people that I'm going to be around are people who are also doing that, because that's what's going to motivate me to be better. Now that I'm not doing it anymore, it doesn't mean that I'm not friends with those people, but it also wouldn't make sense going to be an entrepreneur and starting a health coaching business to spend all my time with people who are teaching young children. Like that's just a really simple example. But I feel like it feels hard to do because there's like loyalties and this feeling of betrayal both ways, or like the nostalgia. And it doesn't mean you're not friends. It's like that all or nothing mindset.
Yeah.
And now almost like my thinking about how we've been talking about science experiment, taking the pieces, I still get to keep the parts of the friends that are with me. Like, and I still get to reach out to them for the things that we did together. And like, it's great.
It's interesting, like when you go back to, like for me, it's like when I see my friends from grad school, I go back to that moment.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like when someone witnesses you, they're like, who is that? I'm like, okay, that was that version of me, you know? And it's like, it's no animosity or anything, but it's like, as people, I think this is just inherently true for everybody. As you grow up and grow out, it's not that you relinquish yourself of those identities or like those friendships, but it's just that your needs are different now.
Yes.
And like how you need to noodle is like quite a bit different now.
And I think the thing, like going back to your original question, the thing that is that I love about community and how I use community is just that. Like I want to be around people who are supporting me, making me feel good, believing in my dreams, and helping my dreams become a reality, because that's also what I want to do for everyone else, regardless of what their dreams are. And I think to me, that is the point of community.
So how do you implement that into what you do for coaches? How do you like coach people into that, to be like, hey, reflect on your communities. What do these mean to you? Are you getting what you need from them?
One of the things that I think is so important in the way that I coach and what I like to do is I have frameworks, and I have, of course, different like paths and things that we follow. But I find that most people are ready to make a big decision, and that is a big decision. When you are like making, you know, our life is made of micro movements, and that like if you are going to decide to spend more or less time with somebody, that's a micro movement that's a big effect on your life and usually has an emotional piece to it. And so most people are ready to make a decision like that when they bring it up. So usually what will happen is I'm coaching somebody and they are talking about either a frustration or an excitement about somebody, or somehow it already gets brought up, and I'm like, I want to dive into that with you. And my favorite thing ever is just tell me more. Like, so if somebody's like, my husband's not da-da-da-da and helping me with this, and I just don't feel supported, I'm like, tell me more. And then we dive into it. And then with something, you know, husbands are pretty permanent. They don't have to be, but, they are. So usually that's not when we're like, okay, kick them out. Yeah. But we're like, so, what are some ways that we can create better communication or create the relationship that you want? And or if they were to say the same thing about a friend or a coworker, we would talk about I would say, what is the ideal amount of space that you would have with them or away from them? Also, in an ideal scenario, what would it look like interacting with them? And it's amazing how when you ask that and you truly answer it, it has never been hard for me to coach someone into creating that.
Yeah.
If somebody's like, I just recently talked to a coach who one of her clients had said something to her and she's like, I just didn't like the way he was talking to me. And I said, well, in an ideal world, what would you want him to say? She's like, I would have wanted him to ask me this question. I said, so the next time he talks to you, you ask him the question. And then he will either say yes or no, and he's going to say yes. And that's basically him asking it to you. Now you're in the space that makes you feel confident, comfortable, and ready to address the topic. So there's a bunch of different ways, but I think when someone else is ready and they bring it up, they are most invested to then apply it and make the positive change.
That is the healthiest communication ever that you can have, where you prompt someone to tell themselves the answer as opposed to telling someone the answer.
Yeah, it doesn't stick the same, doesn't hit the same.
And I don't know why it is. It's like, why can't we just go outside of ourselves and see ourselves better to be like, oh, I see that block, teet, 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 and then just continue forward.
Ego is everything. It's ego on both sides. It's ego on the person who wants to have the answer and just tell it, right? I used to battle with that as a teacher. I used to battle with that as a coach, as a wife. I used to battle with that all the time. Yeah. But now I just I've trained myself to get my kicks on getting the other person to figure it out. But then also, being resistant to figuring something out is ego again, because you're like, well, but then if I take their advice and do their thing, then they're right. And it's like, no, who cares who's right, wrong? There is none. It's just learning and growing.
You also arrive to the same place. Like, it doesn't matter who's driving and who's a passenger presence. It's like, it doesn't matter. You're getting to the same destination.
Yeah. Let's just go there.
Participate. I got music. You got the wheel, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I want to go a little bit into our development of Me 3 together. And what it is to look at someone else's brain and what it does for your own.
One, it just brings me so much joy.
Love that.
Moving into these projects and working on this with you, there is not a single, and I'm like a ball of joy about it today. Like, I was just like, I woke up just so on fire and so ready to do, especially as we're coming to completion. Like, I've been so proud of like what you've created and what I've helped you create. And I feel like we have created together. And so I would say the first part is it brings me joy. And I think part of that is, again, and I guess I would be able to choose who I get to work with, et cetera. But I think there's no one who's going to want to create something of this magnitude who's not passionate and excited themselves.
Yeah.
And passion is contagious. And I love that feeling. Excitement's my favorite feeling. So that is such a big part of it. But the other thing that's really awesome is I love to learn. And I love perspective. And even talking to you, meeting you, and becoming your friend, but then also getting this insight into your brain. And also the entertainment industry is something I know nothing about, right? Which I don't have to help you make a course about it, which is what's really cool. But now I see the depths of like the inner workings of it.
Yeah.
And I get to learn so much about the world, which in turn, I believe the more my brain knows and has, the better I can live in the world for myself, but the better I can also help everyone else live in the world too. Think about the coaches that I'm coaching and things like that, and not using your ideas like your IP, but in terms of just like a depth of understanding of the world every way I turn.
It's such a cool practice where it's like someone hears curriculum and they think formula, right?
Yeah.
But your approach has to be super malleable. And it's information, but it's also a creative approach because you have to pivot yourself to be able to be ready to meet this person where they're at. So I love that your answer was how it makes you feel. That's amazing. Beyond what it feels like. How does it answer how you approach people for you? Like, what's the information of it all? It's like you approach me on this project and I say, I want to get so clear on myself that I become reflective to other people. And you're like, okay, so I know what that looks like in a framework. But as you have to change your perspective, because you can't approach anyone else's want to make a platform like this the same way as you do me.
No.
So what do you learn about like the information of it?
I think that in terms of like the information of the approach and process and making it
like,
happen.
yes, how you do it.
What I have found that I think is really interesting, and I think I see this is kind of how I see the world, is again, not the all or nothing, right? There's so many phases, and we're like, what did you say the other day? You were like, all the rainbow. It's not the shades of gray, it's all the rainbow, right? Yeah. And so if you are looking at that, and let's say I know based on creating a curriculum and knowledge and how knowledge is best placed in sequential order and things like that, I can say, oh, Kate is orange on that, yellow on this, green on this, and then I know how to get you to move all the way to whatever the place is.
Yeah.
But I then divide it up and then place you on a almost like spectrum and then say, which way do I need to nudge her? If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So for you, some of the nudges for you was creating clarity because you are such a creative and such a visionary and also your personal vocabulary is so robust that we had to simplify a lot of that. And it's like, okay, this beautiful sentence that you wrote, I know you love the way it sounds. We got to make it more simple so that the person absorbing it can immediately absorb it versus think, what does that mean right now? Like have to think too hard about it. So that's part of it. And then also because you have your ideas are so depth and already processed in you that we had to pull out the examples of like, when did that happen in your life? So then it could then meet the people who are learning. So they're like, oh, I've had that event in my life. I've had an event just like that.
Yeah.
I understand. I can feel what she's saying now. Like I can apply it so directly to me because I can relate to this here, if that makes sense. Those were like our two biggest, I think, things for you in that rainbow of
No, that makes so much sense because I was interested in your approach because now that I am only seeing reflective natures, I'm like, wow, I've learned so much about how I need to approach things. I learned so much about why sometimes I'm not really understood in a certain space. I've learned so much about why I actually feel that. And so I was thinking about that this morning and I was like, oh, well, then that means that Kayla 1,000% learned about her approach too by doing this.
And I think for me, it's like those same things over and over. And I think things that I can pull away from you I actually think one of the things that I have pulled away from you very specifically about me and my life is my ability and doing this work is I get to live in my nerdiness. And that's something I didn't really allow for myself very much. And it's something that you do so well. And I do in certain parts. Like I do, I'm a big Harry Potter fan, super nerd that way. I'm a big just like book nerd in general. I'm a big Christmas fan, so I'm like super nerdy and it's already Christmas time and it's August for everybody. Yeah. And so there are those like silly things that I allow myself to be nerdy on. But I actually had a friend not too long ago tell his wife after having like dinner with me, be like, wow, I didn't realize how smart Kayla was. And it's because I would not allow that to be shown. Like I maybe oversimplified myself or didn't want to intimidate's not the right word, but I think
well, it's like you want to be digestible.
Yeah, or think that people maybe didn't have the interest to talk about what I want to talk about, which again is about curating community, which I've been practicing. And so I think that's one of the things that I've learned too is like, no, you are who you are and it's beautiful and actually everybody freaking wants to know about it.
Everyone wants to see your authenticity. That's what people are attracted to. Everyone wants to see who you are. And it was such a long journey, but once I found myself there and I was like, yeah, I don't care if you don't like it. I do. Like you cannot disturb my peace. Like once I got there, I was like, whoa, what have I been doing for so long? Because I was the same way. I was like, maybe I shouldn't be so smart. Maybe I shouldn't be so this. I shouldn't show off this part of myself. Like maybe I should just be a little bit more quiet. And it's like, Kate, the people that rubbed the wrong way, it's about them. It's not even about you.
They're just not your people, and that's fine.
And that's fine.
Yeah. I think I felt listening to that, even if I reflect more on it in this moment, I think I just felt like because so many people were like, I hated school. And I'm like, all I want to talk about is education in school. Okay.
And how much I loved
how much I loved it. But whenever I do tell stories of like being a teacher or things like that, people are usually enthralled, like, oh my God. And so
it means something to you. I love that.
Yeah, so that's something I've taken away for sure.
That makes me very happy. So I want to ask you a final question.
Okay.
What is authenticity? Well, like, what does that mean to you as just like a overall concept for others as a coach? All of the lenses and hats that you have, but also what does it mean for you and what your authenticity means to you in what it is that you do and who you are?
I think in general, authenticity to me is breaking all of the rules of the shoulds of society. right? In so many different ways, rules of relationships, who you should be with, how old you should be when you do XYZ, the type of career you should have, how you should dress. I think authenticity is really truly knowing none of those things are rules. Just breaking them and writing all of your own. Just writing your own rules. I think that's what it is. And I try to really apply that to everything. For me personally, like, who am I as an authentic person? I am, like I just said, I like describe the things about me that I think are me, that make me me. I think first and foremost, I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
Who loves to learn. But I think some of the things that I've already described about, and I used to actually really struggle with this because I'm a Gemini through and through, which means I have so many different personalities. And we've joked about, and I actually made a post about this on Instagram a long time ago, where it's like, I have pictures of me speaking at conferences. Like, I have curriculum that's published and is used in the 3 largest, school districts in the state of Oregon. And like, I lead workshops and stuff for tons of people and coach people professionally. But then there's also like, you should see me in Vegas at a pool party dancing. Like, I love dancing until 2 and 3 in the morning, right? But then it's like, but then there's also this. And so that's like this sexy side of me, and the way that I dress oftentimes very matches that aesthetic. But then I also have a bunch of blazers and stuff in my closet. But then there's also that super nerd side of me where when I walked into Orlando, like the Wizarding World, I cried. Walking in. It was the best day of my life, right? And so I have, for a long time, I struggled embracing all of those parts. And so for me particularly, authenticity is not one thing like I thought it was.
Yeah.
Like, we are not one thing. We are so many. And for me, recognizing all of those things in me is it.
You are a thunderbolt.
Oh, I love that.
You are. You're a thunderbolt where it's always going to strike, just never the same place once. And also it's like, if you're not going to if you're going to be a chameleon to a million other people and meet them where they're at, of course you're going to have all these sides to you. Like, that's that multifaceted nature is like what makes you
so good at it, maybe.
Yeah, very good at it. Wait, tell us a little bit about your newsletter. I love reading your newsletter.
So it's new, and it is me embracing that like nerdy side of myself. So when I was doing and running my health coaching business, I did feel really boxed in because I felt like I couldn't talk about the way people thought or all of those things that I'm doing now that I love. And so my newsletter has basically like 3 main components to it. One is a story, an inspirational story about how it's called The Rebellion. So it's about breaking rules so that you can be authentic. So one about how I broke a rule somewhere that made my life better. Then I made a section that I adore called Notes and Quotes to Noodle On. And I love to read to learn. And I have my whole life, I've taken notes on what I've read. And even when I was a teacher, I had one of my principals borrow my notebook and make a copy of the entire thing. And then I still have stapled to that notebook her like thing being like, wow, you have an amazing brain. You're only just getting started in your career. You're going to like do things, right? Just because the way I received information. So, and that second part of the newsletter, I put in like notes and quotes from books that I've read that have been impactful so that other people can have those notes too without, I know not everybody wants to read the whole book. So it's basically Cliff Notes, Kayla Notes. So,
but I like that.
Yeah, I really love that. And then I think we've only had 3 today. Maybe the third one has gone out. And then the last section is just like up for my whatever
it is that you
I feel for the day. Yeah.
Well, so where can people find it or get subscribed to it?
Ooh, you can do that if you follow me on Instagram at It's Kayla Jury. There will always be links there. I'm getting a new website and stuff up. So just go to Instagram for now. And it's a free subscription. It comes out every Tuesday along with my podcast. So
and I'm telling you, if this woman made any kind of notes, you should take them because she finds the things that matter the absolute most and puts them in one place. I will co-sign on that. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes,
you're absolutely amazing. You're a thunderbolt.
I feel the same about you.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to plug or say, share?
That is it. Oh, yes. Make sure when it launches to join me 3 because it will change your life. Kate's going to change your life.
I hope so. That's the goal. Thank you.